So yeah, I got you, Janelle. That's good. I know there's some stuff like that happening. Uh-oh, who is 14038? I'm going to let them in and see what happens. Who's 14038? Do we know who that is? Get Todd with the coffee icon and everything here. Just a moment. Okay. Okay, Nicole. Yeah, I got you. Thanks, Cam. Oh, I see. You already changed your name. Perfect. Yeah. But as long as you change your name, it's good. You can change it while you're in the waiting room, and then I know who it is, but I was pretty quick letting you in. So yeah, that's good. Okay. All right, hopefully that comes back, Nicole. And let me start the recorder again. Oh, I did already. Perfect. Okay, so the question I had promised an answer to before the break was concerning the folks who aren't going to have their 3 years of work experience. So yes, you're in good shape here. You got the answer you want. So if you pass, you write and pass your CFP exam in November of 2021, or by November of 2021, let's say, then you have 4 years after, which is designed to accommodate a mat leave or whatever, to get your 3 years experience. So even if you're lacking a degree or whatever the case is, that's still true, okay? So I think that matches up with what you had suggested. That's true, Robert. You don't get QAFP in the interim. Yes, you have to pass the QAFP as far as I can tell. Okay, now let me, I guess I can ask that question. Okay, but I don't see any indication, at least on the FP Canada website, that you get QAFP in the interim. But I've asked the question and we'll see what happens. So should be able to answer that question after lunch then. Okay, I don't keep my internal chat. So a couple things. If you email me while I'm in class, I won't answer. Okay, I'm not checking my email while I'm teaching stuff to you. I don't even have Outlook open, and I sure don't have my phone. I have my phone flipped over beside me here. Okay, so none of that works. If you have a problem with the webinar, really what has to happen is you have to call the office, and you just call 77934-5577. You can get this number out of everybody's signature block or off the internet or by calling 411. I don't know, is that still a thing? It's always possible to get that number. And yeah, no QAFP required. That's true, Steve. Now, that being said, I still would consider whether it's appropriate to get the QAFP. Okay. I think it's a good idea to get it because it does lock in that degree of progress. Okay. So yeah, that's what it does. It buys you time, right? It buys you until 2023. And as I talk about that, I just want you to think about the number of people on this call who started the program at some point and didn't finish, right? And there are many, many reasons why that happens. Might be that you just get too busy in your business. It might be that you have, you know, what somebody, Jeff talked about staffing issues this morning. It might be that you buy a block of business from somebody. I've seen that sour things. It might be that you have an unexpected change. You get hired on as an associate somewhere and they expect things of you that you weren't anticipating. It might be that you had a baby or 2 or 3, Andrew, right? Okay. These are, might be somebody gets sick. I don't know, whatever it is, right? There are a lot of things that can happen here. Oh, separation. It's funny, I used to see this with my capstone classes. The capstone class I found was a good litmus test for what was going to break in somebody's life when something went wrong. And so you'd find Like I had, and it was awful, but I had a one capstone course that was all divorces. There was like a dozen people in one capstone course who went through a divorce or separation while they were doing the class. I had another one where there was half dozen people who had babies on the way. I don't know what causes these trends. I had another one where there was 3 people who had a cancer diagnosis in the class. So yeah, I mean, these things happen, Bonnie, right? It's we are in the business of helping people to manage risk. We should be thinking about our own risks. Yeah. Okay. And I'm not trying to be flip about your divorce, Bonnie. I know they're never easy, right? It's not something that anybody wants to go through. Okay. Or none at all, Ryan. It'll be one or the other, right? How much can people tolerate each other? Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure you're right. Honestly, I think that's the better bet. But okay. So are people now judging my relationship and Ryan's relationship and wondering what kind of relationships we each have with our spouses? Is that happening? Nice, Philip. It's we're going to see an immigration slowdown, so they got to come from somewhere, don't they? Okay. So nice. You're not contributing to the depopulation of the country, Robert, I guess, eh? Okay, let's pop over to Moodle and we'll have a look there. Did I answer everybody's questions? I think I answered all the lingering questions. Okay. Yeah, it's 3 years in total, Steve. So you'll need 3 years in total. It's actually only 3 years of experience you need. Okay. It's that they give you 4 years to get that 3 years of experience. So that if you had a baby in there, you could still get it. That's really what that's designed for, right? And the person to think about in that context is the university grad who is doing this. Okay. All right, let's try that again. Yeah, I'm having a bad time here with my internet or with my web. It's like the first time I've used the internet. Okay, just a second here. Let's try that. There we go. That's what I wanted. Okay, so no, sorry, I apologize, Cam. I missed that question. No, the PEP at this point can only be done with FP Canada. I should have mentioned that earlier, Cam. I know it's nice to stay with the same provider. You get the same sort of treatment all the way along, but there is no providers other than FP Canada doing PEP right now. I think it's probable that by sometime in 2023, we're doing PEP, but I hope that's too far away for you. Okay. I really hope you have to do it with FP Canada. Okay. Okay. Yeah, and I don't, man, even if they open it up earlier than that, creating the amount of content you need for that course is nightmarish. Okay, so first off, everybody should have a login to this website, okay, to bcceducation.com, and you'll just log in here. It's a normal sort of web interface. And then once you're logged in, and I don't have the same interface you do, but once you're logged in, just up sort of near the top right of the screen, you'll have afterwards, you should see your education resources or education tools or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it will take you to the BCC Moodle site. which looks like so. Okay, people have been busy already this morning. I had my notifications cleared out before we started class. So once you're here, you won't see exactly what I see. I'm logged in as me, so I have a few more options than you have, but you'll see a set of courses laid out like this, and you'll want to go to the course CFP Core Curriculum for QAFP and CFP students. You'll click on that, and it takes you to the news about the exam that we already are aware of, and you'll see a few different resources here, okay? So you do have to do the academic code of conduct quiz in order to be able to do anything. Basically, you'll do your own work. You won't share your work with others. It's pretty straightforward. You'll do your quizzes on your own. That's it. Okay. Then you'll see the case studies. Okay. So you have the case studies and the textbook index here. First thing is you need all 7 case studies. Okay. So I would suggest that you download the 7 case studies, keep them in a folder on your desktop or something like that. They're just simple PDF documents. Everything in the course is just a PDF document. Okay. That's good. You need those right from sort of course 1. So what's going to happen then is you go to unit 1 here. And in unit 1, you have a few different resources. What you need here is the textbook. It's just a short little textbook. Yeah, some people are going to find it easier. Paul, you might find it easier to print them off and put them in a binder or something like that. Some people are perfectly happy working from their desktop. I'm not a paper person myself. I prefer to just have them as PDFs, but I totally understand why somebody would want to print them off. And I know this is way down the road for you, but when you get to your CFP exam, which has case studies, you'll also have printed copies of the case study. So it is nice to sort of get used to working from a printed case study. Yeah, you might only have unit 1. That's normal, Todd. A lot of people will only have unit 1. You should have the cases, though. You do have the case studies, right? Yeah, so it's just as you pay for the follow-on units, that's where you get access to the follow-on units. Okay. If you want access to unit 2, you can pay for access to unit 2 or whatever. But really, you just need unit 1 for now. You'll be okay. Okay. So yeah, you won't see exactly what I see because you're presumably not an instructor. So, so then, yeah, this is what you need. You need the chapter 1 text and you need the case studies. Okay, that's good. There's a sample financial plan. This is more of a FYI if you've never seen a full, robust financial plan. Don't memorize it or anything like that, but if you want to see what a financial plan looks like. And this one is written from scratch in Microsoft Word and Excel, so it doesn't use any templating from any software. It is entirely just from scratch. So it's not a NaviPlan plan or whatever, or a Snap plan or Razor, or whatever we're using out there. It is entirely just from scratch. Okay, and then we have the letter of engagement, and this is more for later, but it fits with the financial plan. Might be relevant again at chapter 16, 17. That's where this starts to show up, but it's useful to see one. You can kind of see what it looks like. Okay, and then you have the quiz. So the quizzes are all pretty much the same thing. There's a little bit of instruction here. It tells you how it works. And with the quizzes, you can play around with them. You can write them again. You can fail them. It does not matter. You do need to pass them to proceed to the next step, but still, it's worth just playing around with them a little bit. Okay, there's no harm in this. You just click on the quiz. It's very straightforward quiz interface. Just attempt quiz now, little 5-question quiz, and you just answer it and it spits back answers. Some of them have really robust, I have no idea what the right answer is. I wrote these quiz questions. I could figure this out, but whatever. It's just a matter of going through and answering them. Finish attempt. And when you do that, you'll see your, oh, that's what I want, submit all and finish. And now it tells me I won't be able to submit and it'll tell me, oh, I guessed one right. All right, so, and it tells you a little why you're wrong, why there's something to consider beyond this, right? Little tools to help answer the question, okay? All right, and early on here, the quizzes are small. As you get deeper into the course, the quizzes get bigger and they have randomized elements added to them later on. But right now, it's really just a matter of kind of getting comfortable with it. And then when you get to, I think it's at chapter 4, then the quizzes also have a lockout. So if you fail it, you can't just go back and rewrite it right away. You have to pass it in order to clear that lockout. And if you don't, then you have to wait a day to rewrite it. And that's just designed to prevent people from just sort of trying, like hammering at the quiz until they get it instead of actually learning the material. Okay. Once you've passed it, then you can go back and hammer at it to your heart's content. Okay. But until you've passed it, you have to have that delay built in once you get deeper into the course. And there's a warning about that when you get there. And then you'll have some assignments as well. So these are a little bit different. I want Dan and Alice, sorry. There it is. So the Dan and Alice financial management problem, it's the first thing you'll do. You could do this today, but I would suggest maybe wait until you're in chapter 3. It's a little bit easier once you've gone through chapter 3. And you're just going to download the Word template. Little instructions are up here. So download the Word template, and then you will submit it. So right here where I have grade, you'll have a submit button. It's just like attaching something to an email. Okay. That's good. Does anybody not have Microsoft Word? Yeah, so that's it, Andrew. You can do the chapter 1 and chapter 2 quizzes today after class or tomorrow morning. Depends where you are for time zones, right? So the BC folks might do it after class today. The Atlantic Canada folks might do it tomorrow morning. Yeah, you shouldn't be sending it to me, Todd. That's not really right. Almost everything, Mark, but not necessarily everything. So there is some stuff that I'll skip over if it's fairly simple or whatever the case is, or stuff that's lower priority. Yeah, I'll skip over some stuff, but I'm pretty thorough. Okay, so I would just do like this, Todd. You see how now I have the little download thing here? So it's downloaded here. And then I will just do a save to my desktop, or I can open it, whatever. And now you'll see this. So it's open in Word now. Oh, I have to reshare because it changes the, there we go. So now it's open in Word, right? So I don't know if you're following along with me here, Todd, or if you can do this or whatever, but then I just type in my answers, just like that. Don't actually answer blah, blah, blah. That's not helpful. And these don't have to be giant answers. These are typically 1 or 2 sentences. They'll get you there. And don't do any math unless you're, okay, so I know exactly why you couldn't. So, because I'll show you that again, Todd. I'll bring you that back. So then let's go back. I'm going to close this out without saving it. Okay. But normally I would save it and then attach it. So the reason you can't enter it is just because of how, just because of how Microsoft responds when you download a document from the web. So again, going back here, when I click on this, it comes up with a little Dan and Alice thing. Sorry, let me show you that again. You can come off mute, Todd. It might be easier. Okay.
Okay, I'm off.
Yeah. Okay, so then you see it down here, right? So I just click on it.
Yeah.
Just give it a second to open up here. Okay, so now because of how Microsoft responds to stuff that I download from the web, it says, well, we're not sure if we want you using this document. And so it has the yellow bar across the top. And as long as that yellow bar is across the top, or whatever color that is, you can't do anything. You see that? So yeah, I can keep hammering on the document and I won't be able to, well, maybe I can, no, perfect. I can't type in there either, right? That's the problem you were having. And so that's where I have to enable editing. And now it's going to open up more like a traditional, like when I open a document from my own desktop. That's how some people have their email set up too, but most web browsers are going to automatically impose that restriction. So now that I have done that little edit document thing, now it opens up like a proper Word document. Does that make sense, Todd?
It does, but I'm going to try because that's not what's happening on my end. So
yeah, so try and let me know where else you're running into a roadblock. And this is exactly the kind of thing that Kelsey is always happy to help out with, and she does get some of these calls to get people through that first assignment. So, so that's something else you can do too, is just reach out to Kelsey. But yeah, try it now or try it at lunch or whatever, Todd. It's all good. No problem with that. You can share your screen with us if you want and show us what's going on here, Todd. It's not the worst thing to do that.
I'm here now and it's not working. So
okay, so here. So from here, do you see the share screen button? Sort of bottom middle of the screen. It's a green box with an arrow in it, or the 2 screens overlaid on top of one another.
You see it.
Yeah, so click on share screen and then we'll get you to share your screen with us. I'm going to just bring you off mute here, Todd, so you don't have to worry about the space bar. The space bar is a little bit difficult to use if you're flipping between windows. Okay.
Myself. Okay, now I'm unmuted.
Yep.
So when I click on it.
So click on share screen for me first.
I did.
And then you should get a little pop-up window that shows you what screens you have open.
Hold on, I have to go back in.
Yeah, go to Zoom. And this would be useful for everybody. Everybody can kind of see the challenges.
Hard to navigate. I don't know how to get you back. So
on your quick launch bar, you should see a little blue square with a white camera in it.
Yeah.
Click on that one and you should get back into the window. And now you should see share screen on there.
I can't get back in.
It's not opening.
Just bear with me here. I'm gonna force you back in here. Okay, so do you have the window up now? You have my window up now?
Yeah, now I do.
Okay, so now you should see it pop over and you should see a share screen on the screen a couple places. There should be one sort of bottom right-ish and another one with 2 little icons on it. Oh, you won't have that one, but the one that's in the black toolbar.
Yeah, I click on it, but it's when I come up, it's got my desktop.
Yep.
And I guess that's what I click on, and I hit
Yep.
share.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, now do you see my desktop?
I didn't share for like, I don't know, when you hit that share, it should have shared.
Sure.
Share screen,
Yeah.
Yeah.
share desktop. It says open system preferences.
Oh, so, okay, you've got something in your, yeah. I'm not surprised at this, but it's the first time I've run into it. You've got something in your system preferences that is preventing, like actively preventing a screen share from happening. So
Might be because I'm on Apple.
it could be, actually, it could be. But I have lots of Apple users, lots of Mac users. I had 2 yesterday who were both like, they're both fairly computer savvy. They were both able to do screen share, no problem.
Okay, now here you go. It's asking me to share. So here I'm.
How do you?
Okay, so now it should work.
Okay, I don't see, normally when it,
Oh yeah, it'll work
there you
now.
go, there you go.
So when I'm here,
Yeah.
Then I click this.
Yeah.
And then I open this up.
Yeah.
And how do you change it so you can enter, because nothing pops up to allow me to edit it.
Right, so this, because you're not in Word, so do you have Word for, that's what I asked a minute ago, right? Do you have Word? Because you're opened it in Pages.
Okay, I probably don't have Word then.
Okay,
Well,
so
what is a Microsoft program?
yeah, there's some people who have Word for Windows or Word for Mac. But anyways, go, I think it's File. I'm not a Mac user, but go File, further left, top, way left, way left.
Oh, up here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I think you can save it as a Pages file on there. I think if you do save and save as a Pages file. I'm not a Mac guy. Any Mac people on the call? I need a Mac person. But there is a way to get that to save as a Pages file. And
Click the little arrow next to that documents box,
thanks, Ryan.
and it's going to let you know back up,
Oh, the arrow?
down arrow right there. See that right
That-
next to you,
Exactly,
right there.
yeah.
And then you're going to be able to typically save as a certain file type.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought too. Oh, Pages. So try, what if you, no, that's just your iCloud.
Because I use the other program and it on there, the one, not the Word, and I entered it there, but then it comes up as an email. Then I can only email it to myself. I couldn't send it to you.
Yeah, so for that, you'd have to print it off and scan it and then put it back in. I might have to get you to, and I don't know.
Sake of argument, can you click on your little launch icon, your little spaceship on the bottom? One more over. Yeah, hit that launch pad for us. And then just scroll to the right for me. I just want to see what other programs you have. One more.
That's it. Oh, I do have one more.
Okay, nothing.
But
Nothing.
Word, yeah. Okay.
No other program. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get you on after the call or before it calls. There's no assignments today anyways,
Okay.
Steve, but we will
We'll deal
get
with
to,
it later.
yeah, I know there's a way to do this because I have plenty of students who, if you have the paid version of Acrobat, Robert, that's true. But if you're just using the free version of Acrobat, you don't have the ability to note up files, right? So, okay.
I may have to do the assignments on my work computer because this is my home computer.
I think you would find that a million times easier. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. And you won't be, like the quizzes, they'll still be fine on here. Still the same login, all that kind of stuff. So yeah. It's just when you get the assignments. Okay, sorry about that. That's, I think Jim was right here. It's just honestly, if you're like Mac people have to, I don't know, sometimes live in that Microsoft world, right? It's however it goes. Okay. So that's really the whole shot. It's just a matter of reading the chapter, grab the chapter, have it. You need the chapters for everything, even though, like you said, I do go over. Oh, there, Mark has a suggestion too. Yeah, LibreOffice. I know OpenOffice too. So, okay. Perfect. Okay, and there is a textbook index here. So if you're trying to find a concept in the text, you can crack open the index. It's alphabetical. It covers all 18 chapters. So you can generally research something or look it up, whatever you need when you're going through the material. Okay. All right, now a couple of other resources I'll show you while we're over on the web. And the first is a document that you're going to need for some of the homework. Okay, this is discussed in chapter 1, and you do need this for some of the homework. It's the projection assumption guidelines, and it's a document that FP Canada has put together. And some of you might know some of the volunteers that work on this project. It's a document that FP Canada has put together to really fill in the gap when a financial planner needs to make an assumption. Okay, so when do you need to make an assumption? When are assumptions required? There, I know you know some of these. See, that's it, right? Okay, so why do I need to make an assumption for rates of return? Because I don't know, right? That's when I need an assumption, is when I don't know. So if I know the information, I use it. If I'm missing the information, and there's no way to know it. So if I'm missing information, I use an assumption. Now, if I can get the information later, great. But if I can't, I might be stuck with an assumption. Okay. Put my screen down a little bit. What can you not see, Phyllis? Sorry. Oh, there's nothing there. It's just a logo on top. Okay. The title. So yeah, I put the link in the chat box, Robert. I'll put it there again. Okay. So you can Google it. I'll show you in a second where FP Canada has a bunch of stuff all sitting together that's useful this way. Okay. So you were looking for the URL, Phyllis. Is that what you're looking for? Yeah, it's not a bad idea, Mark, to save it to your favorites. Okay. We should get a new version of this fairly soon. There's normally one every spring. I'm not sure if they're going to delay it. I don't know if they have to meet in person to do it. Okay. So nice. Yeah, learning Zoom, Steve. It's everybody's in this boat together right now, right? So, okay, so if I know the information, I use it. And a good example of this is if I have a client in a 5-year GIC. Well, I'm not going to make an assumption here. I know what rate they're getting on that GIC. Is that fair? I don't need to make an assumption there, okay? Or if I have a mortgage, the client has a mortgage, I know what their mortgage rate is for the current term. So in a mortgage, the rate for the current term is known. Now, subsequent terms, that's where I should assume. And what's important then is when you create the financial plan that you list all of your assumptions. No, it's fine, Steve. All right, so so whatever you assume, you list your assumptions. And there are at least 2 reasons to list all your assumptions. Why would I list them all? So I show the client, and yeah, so what's the benefit of showing the client that? What kind of protection is this providing, or what's this from a, go ahead, Sean.
Transparency.
Yeah, I agree with that. So it gives transparency. Why is that transparency useful? So they understand where there's an assumption used. Okay, that's fair. The client knows where there's an assumption used, but I would suggest there's a more concrete answer to that. So
If you're going to be wrong, you want it to be wrong on one of your assumptions or the things you couldn't have known.
okay, so this could account for an error, right? And if I am explicit, then that's where, yes, everybody's answers about transparency and protection are really good answers here. If I get better information that way, okay, if better information later on shows up, then I can use it. Yeah, and years down the road, so now you're whatever, 3 years later, you compare the assumptions to the reality, or whatever that's 3 years, but yeah, that's it, Ryan, right? So that's where I compare my assumptions to reality so that I can now make this adjustment. I know, okay, we assumed that we were going to get a 3.7% rate of return net of fees, but we got a 4.1% rate of return net of fees. And that's where we would come back and make some adjustments to the plan. Instead of having to scour the whole plan to figure out what I have to change now, I should have some relatively easy inputs that I can fix. Yeah, it's true too, Grant. If I used bad assumptions, now I hope that you're not using bad assumptions, but it is a garbage in, garbage out problem. And you may have this, okay? You may have a scenario where the client insisted on you using some information that you knew was not correct, but you go with it. Has anybody ever had that scenario where a client says, I believe that we're going to get, 10% rate of return, or I believe inflation is going to be 5%, or something like that. Okay. Yeah, so we're going to arrive at a calculation like that here, Bonnie, right? So that's where, I think the garbage in, garbage out is a good way to put that. All right, that's all good. Now, if I know something, that's not an assumption, okay? So I'll show you an example here of a known fact versus an assumption. So right now, yeah, we do see some mistakes with UL. I'll agree with that, okay? We'll talk about that way down the road. In fact, we don't really get into that kind of stuff until advanced curriculum. So let's say I have a client who earns $80,000 a year. Okay, I have a T4 or a notice of assessment, whatever. I have pay stubs. We know this is true. Okay, is that an assumption now? Am I making an assumption here? That is a fact, okay? That is exactly what that is, Bev. That is a fact. However, there are several assumptions that I would apply to their earnings. So what are the assumptions based on this? Okay, so I can assume that they would have, I think I could calculate tax. I think I should be able to calculate tax. I can, though, assume that this would be inflated or indexed to inflation or something else, whatever the assumption is. I can assume that they will keep that job, that their earnings stay the same. Okay, those are all assumptions. Is that fair? I can't know those things. So that's where I want to distinguish between what's a fact and what's an assumption here. Sure, yeah, perfect, Bev. So we might make assumptions about overtime and bonus, for example, versus your base salary. Perfect. Okay. yeah, grant that yearly raise, whether it's indexed or whether there's performance bonuses or whatever, right? Or performance increases. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Any questions there? Okay, perfect. Now, let's have a quick look at some of the things that are assumed in this document, or some of the things that we can draw from. Yeah, I'll show you. See, but you missed nothing there. Well, I don't know, Steve, because of the whole COVID thing, normally it gets updated every year. We'll see whether or not that happens this year. Okay. Yeah, it's worth saving. If there's a new version, I'll show you how you'll know that. So there's a nice little description here. It's good. There's a description of how this thing works. Okay, it is worth reading. It's good to see there's some methodology to it. You might not agree with the methodology, and that's fine. Okay, that's helpful to know whether you might not agree with it. Okay, so this describes how all this shows up. We'll get to where we got to go here. I just want to give you a rough idea. Here's the first one that we're going to deal with. And this is one we'll use quite a bit in the course. So this is a rough version of a mortality table. Okay, and you can actually download the app and do the same thing. So you can download the FP Canada app. It's a free app on your phone. It's available on all devices. And you can plug in. You can say, I've got somebody who's 61 years old. What's expected mortality? And it does some of that other return stuff as well. Pretty slick, actually. The app is okay. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do for a typical client. Let's say my client is 61 years old. Just for the sake of argument, I got a 61-year-old male. So what I would do is say, well, how long do we want to plan? What's our sort of planning horizon here? Well, I would put them at age 60. I would say, okay, we'll just assume age 60. And then we're going to use, for the vast majority of people, we're going to use the 25% column. So we go find 25%, and then we will find a single male and say, okay, that person is expected to live to age 94. Now, what that means is if I have 100 61-year-old males, if we assume that our actuarial information is correct, that 25 of them should live to age 94. Okay. What's wrong with using the 50% column? Why not use the 50% column for my 61-year-old male? Why not assume age 89? So and that's not, so run out of money is not bad. And what's going to happen here, I'm going to be right half the time. So what do you think about being right half the time? Okay, so this is true half the time. This is what happens though for pension calculations or insurance calculations. They're perfectly fine to use that. Why can pensions and insurance get away with being right half the time? Okay. So yeah, and that's 95 is a pretty median number on this chart, right? So the benefit for pensions and insurance is from a funding perspective, Andrew, is they benefit from the law of large numbers. So they're going to be right half the time and wrong half the time. And that's okay, because the people for whom they are wrong are going to give credits to the people for whom they are right, or the other way around, whichever, okay? But you can't do that with your clients, right? If you have 100 61-year-old clients, you can't say to half of them, well, I'm going to be wrong with some of you, but don't worry, the people that I'm right about, they'll make it up. It doesn't work like that on an individual basis, right? For your individual client, you don't have law of large numbers to work with. So that's where you use the 25% column to introduce a margin of safety. Now, it's true, Nicole, probably people don't even want to hear that message, right? That you're hoping they're one of the ones you're right about, right? So this is what we would do for somebody in sort of ordinary health with a normal predisposition to longevity. Okay, somebody where we don't see any reason to deviate from the norm. Okay, so yeah, Paul, your 95 is pretty run of the mill here in that 25% column, right? Okay. What do clients say when you pull out 95, Paul? Do they like it? Okay, I know some people come back and say, no, I'll be dead by the time I'm 85 or whatever, but the statistics do not support that. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that might be too conservative for some people, Ryan, right? Okay. Yeah, that's good, Grant, right? Good to have a way to explain it. Okay. And we'll talk about that in more detail in chapter 14. In chapter 14, we're going to work through this longevity discussion. Okay. Yeah, so this is a fair point, Paul, right? If I have somebody where they're in poor health, okay, or they have no family history of longevity, maybe then I want to use the 50% column, okay? It's okay to use the 50% column if the scenario supports it, okay? Nobody is saying you have to use 25% in all cases. There are times when it makes perfect sense to use the 50% column, okay? What about 10%? When would you use the 10% column? It's true, Steve. Give a reason why you did it. Absolutely. And that goes back to tracking your assumptions. Okay. So when would you use the 10% column? Yeah, if there's good health, predisposition to longevity, Bonnie, this is where the 10% column is going to make more sense. Okay. This is my mother's case. Penny, my mother, okay. She had her mother and then 10 aunts and uncles, and of her 10 aunts and uncles, sorry, yeah, that's right. So 9 of that whole crew, so 9 out of the 11, lived to their late 80s or early 90s. So Penny is predisposed to longevity. Okay. That's fair. She is, Bev. That's a true story. Yeah. From Fife Lake. Not too far from, who was from Shaunavon? Not too far from Shaunavon, right? Okay. There you go, Janelle. All right. although she's from like all over the place down there. This was current area, Kindersley area. Okay. You can sort of draw a line from the Montana border up to Kindersley, and she's lived in all those towns. All right. Yeah, I don't know about this, Mark. I've not seen that. I've not seen a mandated age of use of age 100. Is there a New Brunswick rule there, Mark, that I'm not aware of? That's possible, but I've certainly not seen any legislation that supports that. Okay. But I can understand why you would. Good to be fairly conservative there. Okay. And that could very well just be an IGWM rule as well. Yeah. I know that IG has some specific rules around how you calculate the sort of validity of the pension transfer decision. We're actually not going to have that discussion until advanced curriculum, but there we get into a lot of depth on it. So yeah, that's good. I'd be curious to see that that policy or whatever the case is. I know in the early days of that, before there was sort of a robust plan, I helped a few consultants to navigate that, but I know the rules have developed since then. Okay, so then with a couple, so let's say I have a couple and they are 47 and 52. Okay, well now I would do the same thing. I find them on the chart. And I would say with two of them, there's a likelihood that at least one of them lives until age 98. Okay. All good? It's a fairly simple tool to use as long as you've sort of done it once. And like I said, the app actually does a lot of this for you if you download the app. Okay. So I guess you're sitting across from a client, you can pull out the app and tell them they're going to be dead when they're 91. The app says it. Can't be wrong. Okay. We're not going to go into all the other assumptions here just yet. We'll come back to this later on. There are some assumptions here for rates of return and inflation. And there's quite a bit more detail as it concerns these rates of return and inflation. We're going to do more of that work in chapter 10. Okay, just to recognize that there are some assumptions here, but really we'll park that until we've done a little more investment work. I know some of you are very comfortable with this language, but I'd rather do it when it fits in chapter 10. Okay, and they do have sort of a, you know, how right were we or how wrong were we section, so you can go back and look at this. I don't know, it's interesting. Okay. Now, if you're doing a mortgage, for example, would you use a 5% borrowing rate for a mortgage today? So we see a borrowing rate of 5% here. Would anybody do a mortgage at 5%? No, it's crazy, right? You would not do that. You would go to whatever bank website or Rate Hub or something like that, and you would pull rates and you would use something, I'm assuming, closer to 3%. So again, if you have better information available, use that better information. This would be more consistent with the person who has a line of credit and might still have it, whatever, 3, 5, 10 years from now. Something like that. I actually don't think there's that many places where I would use the borrowing rate at all. I think it's rare that you would have to use an assumed borrowing rate. Most of these things you should be able to get, yeah, including Bev from a mortgage broker, who would be able to give you all kinds of rates if you need them. Okay, that's all good. And I'm a big fan of having folks like mortgage brokers on standby with questions like that. Okay. Yeah, it's absolutely true, Todd, and we're going to work through that in chapter 3. So your borrowing rate and your qualifying rate can be quite different. As you say, there's normally a 2% spread there. Okay, yeah, absolutely, Todd. That's going to show up in chapter 3. But really, in my financial planning projections, I'm doing sort of long-term projections here. Typically, I'm probably not using my financial planning projections to determine mortgage eligibility, although it could be. It's not impossible. Okay, that's pretty much the whole document. There's a little bit at the tail end here. Oh, I thought there was a little volunteer acknowledgement, but I guess not. Okay, so then where you get this stuff is from the FP Canada website. Okay, so the FP Canada site has a bunch of different stuff on it. It's quite busy, actually. I find it tends to be too much usually to navigate, but they do have a sort of home for all the exam tools. This is a page you'll use when you're getting ready for your exam. Okay. And there are a couple of things that we're going to look at here. We're going to look at the competency profile, and then we're going to pop over to the body of knowledge. Okay. So the competency profile, and again, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, maybe more than you like to see the whole page here, but the competency profile really answers the question, what is a financial plan and what goes into a financial plan? Okay, so this is where we're sort of setting the standard. Now there is another document, but it's currently in for revision. There's another document that does some of this as well, which I can't show you right now because all the versions of it that are electronic are unavailable, but it's all right. We'll see it at some point. So this is a fairly lengthy document, and you may or may not want to read through it. If you're somebody who likes to really dig into how things work, there's some value. If you say, just show me the end result, then you'll probably find this document frustrating. Okay? It's broken down into really 2 components. The first 7 pages is just kind of fluff. You'll see FP Canada and their infographics. They love infographics. And then our elements of competency. So I do want to show this for a moment, that there are 6 components to the financial plan. I know some of you are saying that looks like 7 to me, and I'll talk about that right away. So there are these 6 components to the financial plan. Okay, and that's the idea, is that we can take a financial plan, we can do a modular financial plan, or we can do a comprehensive financial plan. So a modular plan would just focus on 1 or 2 areas, whereas a comprehensive plan would focus on all 6. Now you'll notice that I skipped fundamentals, and that's just what ties the other components together. I always think of fundamentals like an executive summary, where you're really just using that to say, well, here's the relationship between all the other areas. This is how one area you'll push into the other. And this is sort of the big picture perspective of those 6 smaller components. Okay. And then down below, we have the professional skills. That's the other chunk that I need to show you briefly. We're not going to go through this in painful detail, but there is some stuff we have to look at here. And this is the things that a financial planner is expected to be able to do. Okay, that's all good? Okay. So we'll skip the infographic thing real quick here. Just all sort of the introductory. Oh, I should show you this, I guess. So there are 3 components to your financial plan. Okay. 3 functions, I guess: collection, analysis, and recommendation. Now, I'm going to show you this again later on, but this is something that we should be thinking about right now. So collection, and I know some of you have heard me tell this story before, but it's not going to stop me. So collection is simply just gathering information. This is where I'm getting to know my client. Analysis is where I take the information that I've gathered and figure out how to use it, what's appropriate for the client. And then recommendation is where I actually say, here, client, is what you can do to get closer to your objectives. Okay. Now, gathering those objectives is a big part of collection. So we can talk about that first. What is an objective? What do we mean when we use this word objective? We could say goal here if you want. If you prefer goal, I'm perfectly fine with goal. I don't see a substantive difference between the two things. Okay, that's a good example, Janelle. So you might say, yeah, and some of them be shorter term, some of them be midterm, some longer term. Exactly, Grant. Yes. So we say, I want to retire at age 55. Now, how do I know if I have met that objective? Is that an objective that I can actually measure? Can I figure out whether or not the client has done that? So, I mean, arguably, Paul, anybody could retire at 55, couldn't they? What's stopping every single person from retiring at age 55? Okay, so yeah, so I probably need more than just to say retire at 55. I would suggest that as the financial planner, so this might be what the client tells us, but really that's not helpful in terms of measuring progress. Okay, so yeah, what I might look at here is maybe we need to retire at age 55 with enough resources to support whatever it is, $60,000 of income per year. Sorry. Okay, so so that's what we need to do. We have to get something measurable here, Grant, right? So if I say something like this, that we're looking for enough resources to support $60,000 of annual income, now I can get to measure it. Is that fair, Grant? And we can look at progress tracking along the way. We can say what's required to do this. Okay, all good? Okay, perfect. So now you're not always going to get to that point. This will be a different conversation with a 30-year-old client. For my 30-year-old client, how well defined is their retirement goal going to be versus a 50-year-old client? Would you expect to get the same degree of fidelity from a 30-year-old client as a 50-year-old client? Yeah, I would say generally not. Now, maybe some cases, Todd, you're going to see more of that. Okay. Yeah, it depends, Steve, right? But a couple things. My 50-year-old, whether they want to or not, we probably just know more about what this person's retirement is likely to look like at 50, right? We're going to know more about their lifestyle spending by then. We'll have a good handle on health and debt. We'll know more about what their career looks like and what retirement really means for them. My 30-year-old, this is probably fairly intangible, and that's exactly it. See if we're using a ton of assumptions for the 30-year-old. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point too, Todd, right? We got to think about some realism in our scenarios here, right? Okay, so the I mean, we can make that assumption, Philip, if you want. If you like that assumption, run with it. Now, I'm going to switch gears here. So tell me if this sounds about right. So you've got a client that you've never met before. You're in your first proper meeting with this client. Maybe you met them casually somewhere, but you've never had an actual financial planning discussion with them. Okay. And you sit down with this client and you're sort of 25 or 30 minutes into your first financial planning discussions with this client. You've done a bunch of collection and now you're starting to form a picture. So tell me if this is about typical. We're maybe 25 minutes into this thing, and in your head, you've got this idea formed. You say, here are 2 or 3 things that this person needs to do in order to be able to retire. Sorry, I apologize. Okay, so you're not sort of mentally forming that picture, Andrew. And if you're not, that's good. I'm not picking on that, but I think that for most of us, we might be forming that picture fairly early in that conversation. I don't know. Do you think I'm wrong here? Yeah, I think that's typical, okay? It's hard not to do. So yeah, and I'm not suggesting you're making recommendations here, Andrew. That's not at all what I'm suggesting, okay? I'm saying in your head, you might have those things floating around where you say, yeah, probably some term life insurance. Probably we need to get a power of attorney in place. We should go check into those 3 TFSAs, right? Something like that, right? Where you've already got sort of a picture here. And I'm not trying to pick on that practice, okay? Or pick on that habit or whatever we want to call it. I think that is a very normal, natural thing to do, okay? And that's going to happen partly because we generally have sort of, I don't know, whatever the number is, 5 or 6 client profiles. Would that be fair? We tend to find clients that are either like us or our clients tend to refer to people that are like them. Again, am I wrong there? Okay. So, and that's it, Bonnie, right? We have these naturally built-in processes where our brain just gets out in front of us, right? That's what, yeah, it's an instinctive thing, okay? And you'll hear, oh, what's AJ Agarwal? Anybody ever hear the AJ Agarwal talk? If you ever get the chance, he's really good. He's a behavioral economist, or actually he's technically just an economist from University of Toronto. And he does this talk about the brain being a prediction machine, where so much of what the brain does is just filling in what's next for us. So here's what I'm going to suggest is the normal sort of default mode. And if you don't do this, great. Okay, that will help you. But I would suggest default mode is that we skip analysis, or we do a very light analysis. And we're already sort of into recommendation mode. Now, doing things like saying, I never give a recommendation in the first meeting is a good way to reduce the likelihood of this happening. So you can implement processes to prevent this. I agree with that. And for those that do that, beautiful. That helps you get where you got to go here. But here's what's going to happen on the exam. The exam is exactly going to pick on this. Okay? The exam expects you in every scenario to do a robust analysis. And whether it's intentional or not, I don't know if this is intentional. I think it just plays to our instincts more than anything. But the questions will often be written in a way where you'll want to skip that step. So this is what we're going to work on in this course. This is really a good chunk of what we do in this course, is just to slow down solve the problem, and then make a recommendation. And this is part of why we'll spend a ton of time on the financial calculator. Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about fiduciary duty way down the road, Stephen, in chapter 17. Okay. Yeah, and that stuff is all good, Andrew, to help prevent this tendency. Okay. So it does, Mark, and this is a good question, whether you have time to do proper analysis. What it's going to be more so, Mark, is that, especially with multiple choice testing, is that questions will be presented in a way that there might be two answers that are analysis questions and two answers that are recommendation questions. And that tendency to jump to recommendation will show up there. We put on our problem solving hat and we say, well, the client they have this problem, they just do this, problem solved, right? But a question that goes in that path will really want you to slow down and get to the analysis answer and not jump to recommendations. Okay, so it's not really a question of, especially with multiple choice, it may not be doing the analysis, it may be demonstrating that you're aware that the analysis has to be done. Is that reasonable? Okay. Yeah, that definitely happens, Mark. Okay, absolutely, that we jump to conclusions. So you're going to see this when we work through content, that sometimes I will say, well, we're going to slow down and solve that problem. And what I'm really trying to train us all together to do is to get used to that, to get used to really making sure that we know everything or everything possible or everything practical before we start to solve problems. Okay. Okay. Perfect. Now, the other document, oh, sorry, we're not even done with this document. We're only on page 3, whatever. Okay, so then if we scroll down a little bit here, we have the components of the financial plan. Now, again, I don't want to go into this whole thing. I just will show you. We're going to use an easier to follow chunk of it here. Pop down to investment planning. Okay, So I'm in just the investment planning section here. And you can see it's broken down into collection. All this collection that's got to happen, and then analysis, all this analysis that's got to happen. And what you'll notice here is the recommendation portion is really small, okay? There's very little sort of recommendation work, even though that's what the client's going to see. More of what's happening is really behind the scenes here. Okay, so the analysis portions really expect you to dig in. The collection portions expect you to really have a full picture before you start to do that analysis. Okay, that's good. And then the other component to this, or the other chapter, whatever, is the professional skills. Okay, so professional skills, these are also examinable. So all of the stuff in this document is examinable. And again, I don't need you to memorize this. I want to assure you that as we work through the course, we're covering off all of this. Okay, so just to pull a random example here, professional skill 204 respects differences of opinion and the decisions of others. Well, this means you're going to see this with Dan and Alice. Okay, the Dan and Alice case study, the first one you're going to use in the course, has a fairly heavily biased client scenario in it. The client is clearly subject to some bias in how they spend their money, and that's fine. It's not up to you to judge how that client spends their money. That's really what this means. Now, it's one thing not to judge the client, but what we can do here is help them understand the consequences of their actions. Okay, does that make sense? So client, I get that you want to take an expensive vacation every year, and you can do that. But if you're going to do that, then we're going to have to make some adjustments to your retirement plan. Okay, that's fair. So I really like Paula Pant. Anybody know Paula Pant? She's a U.S. personal finance podcaster, and her podcast is Afford Anything, the Afford Anything podcast. And the message is, you can afford anything, but you can't afford everything. And I like that way of looking at it. I'm always a fan of that. Okay, that's good. Okay, the other document we'll look at from FP Canada, and we're again not going to go into this thing in its full detail, but as you're working through the course, it might from time to time say, is this something that's tested? Do I actually care about this? How much do I have to know about a particular concept? Is Jason sending me down a garden path here? Oh, Paula Pant, Bev. I actually haven't listened to her in a long time now. I shouldn't say she's one of my favorites anymore. I found whatever that U.S. Personal Finance Committee went all haywire with the FIRE movement, and I couldn't handle it anymore. But anyways, yes, Paula Pant and Afford Anything. Okay. So the credit and debt. So this is where I can click on any one of these topics. So foundation, I'm going to do a more interesting one. We'll look at credit adjudication. So I can pop up the credit adjudication section. Yeah, that's a good technique, Grant. And I'm a big fan of that kind of thing where you have a specific technique that you have adopted to, slow yourself down, right? And to make sure that you're actually engaged in a robust decision-making or analytical process. So Spin sounds good. I've never heard that before, Grant. I like that, but that seems right on track. Okay. Where'd you pick that up, Grant? Whose technique is spin? Oh, okay. Interesting. All right. Nice. Okay. So within credit adjudication, if I want to say, well, how much do I really have to know about this? I can pop in here and I can see what's expected of me as a student. Don't try to read the whole thing. It's not designed to be read all cover to cover. It's actually about 460 pages if you sort of run it end to end. So it's too much. It's good to sort of go in and check a particular topic, but that's all you need. And this explains how the exam questions get created. You see these action words. Anybody have an education background? Any former teachers on the call? No former teachers. A former teacher will know these are what's called Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives. And that's really where, see down at the bottom here, I can say, well, how heavily is this going to be tested? Okay, so when I see an explain, for example, explain the impact of the 5 C's on the outcome of credit application. Okay, so I know explain means that I can tell a client what it is, but it's not calculate. I don't have to be able to calculate it, which is good because that would be nearly impossible. I don't have to estimate it. That would be a little bit more difficult. I just have to be able to explain it. Okay. And evaluate then. Evaluate would be a more robust term. So evaluate shows up way over here. And that's where I can say, well, this is going to happen or this is likely to happen because of this. So again, this is all reflected in the material. As we go through the material, things that are explain topics get a lighter write-up than things that are evaluate topics. Or when we're in class together, explain topics get less work than evaluate topics do. Okay, yeah, lots that we can learn from each other in a class like this, Steve, right? We heard so much experience on the call when we started. So for people that are willing to share like Grant is here, there's, again, tons to be learned. Okay. Let's pop back to PowerPoint. Okay, so what do I think you should be doing to succeed, to get through the course? So I'd like to see 20 or 30 minutes per day of reading. Now, sometimes you might have to put in more than this. This would be something that I think we should all be doing, okay, as a sort of minimum level of commitment. And this should stay true once you're done the course as well. So for now, you can use this time to read the textbooks or go through the material or whatever the case is, but I really think this has to start right now. So whatever calendar system you use, crack open your calendar, block aside, I don't know, 8 a.m. to 8:30 every single day, and call that your CFP study time. You'll be rewarded for that. That daily study is how we get concepts to sink in for the long term. And when you think about the long term here, consider that you're probably a minimum in your absolute best case scenario. You're going to be writing your perfect, Grant. All right, you need to be writing your last exam about a year and a half from now. And you'll still need to know the stuff you learned on day 1 of class then, okay? So that's where it's important to have a study tool or a study technique that's going to help it to stick. And this is where we have this sort of trade-off. these 8-hour days are good for pushing a bunch of content out. But if this is all you do, then you're not going to have concept stick. Okay? I know it's shocking, but you will not remember every single thing I have said a year and a half from now. Right? We're all good with that. So you have to do other things to make sure that what we're doing in class does stick with you. And a big part of it is just that regular study. Okay, so I didn't show the videos this morning. I meant to show them. With every chapter except chapter 1 and chapter 2, but starting in chapter 3, there are video playlists. Okay, and we can also, once you know the calculator, you're going to practice the calculator. And let me pop back to Moodle for a minute, and then we'll take our lunch break, come back, and I'll talk about the rest of this after lunch. Okay, so just in Moodle, I should have shown you these things earlier. I'm back in the same learning resources. When I get to Unit 1, okay, a couple things. You'll see the blank PowerPoint deck here. Has everybody got this blank PowerPoint deck? So this is actually the PowerPoints that I use in class. And you can go through that PowerPoint deck. It's always available the evening before class or no later than the morning of, but usually the evening prior. You can go grab it, or you can grab it from last class. It's going to be pretty much the same class to class to class. And you can actually print that off and take notes on it if you want. And I'm not suggesting you should, but I know some people like to follow the flow. That can help to follow the flow. Then after class, I always take notes throughout the day. I should have probably told you this earlier, right? So everything that we do in class, I take the screenshot of. Okay, so you see screenshots here as we're going through. It's super easy to do this. And I will share that, and you'll see it's not identical to what we've done today, but it's essentially the same stuff. Okay. That's good. So there we are right there. So you don't have to necessarily take every last note. It can be useful. I know some people learn better that way, but we can go through. And then the other things here to show you, there's a discussion forum where you can post questions, and you'll see some students do this, and I answer the forum post every day. Okay. Yeah, so Steve, there actually is, if you're hosting the meeting, you have to use the annotate function. And within the annotate function, there is a save button in there, and it saves it as a .jpeg file. Okay, but you have to have the annotate function open in order to have that. So yeah, Zoom is super easy for that. Okay. And then the other set of resources that I failed to show you earlier is the video. So when you get further into the course, chapter 3 is the first that has this, but in chapter 3, you'll see the chapter 3 video playlist pops you over to, oh, I got one more thing to show you, pops you over to YouTube. And I have a bunch of little sort of 5 to 15-minute videos covering concepts that are in that chapter. Okay, so you can watch those. And some people like the videos, some people don't, but I like to have them available. I think they're a nice resource. And as far as today's class goes, so at the end of the day, so we're recording this right now, at the end of the day, the classes will be posted up here. So I know a couple of you have missed a half hour or whatever. And I just want to make it easy for people to catch that. See, some people Mark. Now I get sick of my own voice, Mark. So I'm jaded about the videos. But so if you click on recordings here, you will see the recordings from in class. That's just exactly what we did here. The only downfall to these videos is they don't capture the chat transcript. So to capture the chat transcript, yeah, exactly, Sean. If you did LLQP with me, this will all be very familiar. Yeah, 100%. The chat transcript captures the chat. So I save all the chats. Okay. See, Alicia, there. We're breaking for lunch right away, anyways, Alicia. Okay. Yeah. So at the end of today, Steve, I will replace the ones that are on here with today's class recordings. Yeah. Okay. Unless something messes up, occasionally something messes up in the recordings or whatever, and then I don't replace them. But assuming I record properly and there's no technical errors, then yeah, I will replace them. Okay, shall we break there for lunch? We can break pretty close to on schedule. So over lunch, I'm gonna end the meeting because it actually makes it easier to manage the recordings. I'm gonna end the meeting. You'll have to rejoin the meeting. There'll be the whole waiting room thing. And we'll kick off again at 32 past. That's a 45-minute break.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, sure, Todd. Yeah.
So can you go through the recordings for like what you're going to go through the next day before we even go through it? So we could already go through it once before, like from the last time you recorded, or no?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can watch last class, the last time I taught economics for financial planners. You can watch that and prepare questions and think through what you want to talk about in class. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah. So yes, there are CE credits for being in class, Bonnie. You'll see Rose pop into the class from time to time. When Rose comes here, she's taking attendance, so she can give you CE credits. Yeah.
I need those.
Perfect. Yeah. So Rose does a good job of handling them. Yeah. So that's all. That's a no-brainer side benefit. Absolutely. Okay, let's break there. We'll kick off again, I guess now at 33 minutes past. Perfect. Thanks. Glad you asked that question, Todd. That's solid. And again, you have to rejoin after lunch or whenever. Thanks.